Art Talk Rewind, a podcast series by Luxembourg Art Week. This series revisits the art talks that took place at the fair, where partners and guests explored key questions shaping contemporary artistic creation and the art market. Episode 2. Artist data and digital image platforms in the information age, in collaboration with Elektron.
So good morning again. You're here for the talk about artist data and digital image platforms in the information age. The talk is presented to you by Elektron. So Elektron is a new platform at the intersection of art, digital technology, science, and societal issues, and we're based in Esch-sur-Alzette. This is Vincent Crapon and me, Françoise Pause. Our way of functioning is in a distributed, flexible way. We had a public art exhibition in the public space, so we don't have a space of our own. But we like discussing the subject of digital technologies and art with the broader public, because we think it is important to involve the public in the discussion about the challenges that we all are facing in our digital world. So today, as I said, the subject is, in French, we have a title which was Donner à voir, which we couldn't really translate into English. But donner à voir, so it's a word play, meaning, so what we want to talk about is how artists are using data and they are visualizing these data. So digital images are part of their work, digital image sourcing, AI. And so we have Corinne Vionnet and LaRochelle with us to discuss the subject. And maybe I just leave Vincent to elaborate a bit more.
Mine here, yes. Thank you for joining us today. So basically, we invited these two artists because we worked with them earlier this year in the exhibition that Françoise mentioned. Lucas showed a piece in the public space along the Rue de l'Alzette in Esch-sur-Alzette, and Corinne shown a series of work in a shopping center called the Centre Mercure, also in Esch-sur-Alzette, and you'll see pictures in a few minutes. We invited them because their work was really compelling around the theme that we explored, which was basically infrastructures of the digital world. It was important for us to actually present work by artists to really ask questions about information and how the information is used, how the information is found, and how the information also makes its way towards the viewers. I won't say too much about the work of each because you both have 2 moments. So Corinne, you will have an exchange with Françoise for about 15 to 20 minutes. And Luca, you will do a presentation for about the same time. And after that, we will open for questions to the audience. When you have questions, just raise your hands and then a mic will come to you. We are, I think, recording this talk only audio. So that's why it's important that when you talk, just speak in the mic. I think we can start by introducing the artist. Françoise, if you could introduce briefly Corinne, and then I will introduce Luca, and then we will start with your presentation.
Thank you. So, Corinne Vionnet, you're a Swiss artist. Welcome back to Luxembourg. And Corinne is very much known for one distinctive photographic series, the Photo Opportunity series that you started around the year 2000, a bit later in the early 2000s. The work involves creating composite photographies, and we're going to talk about how Corinne is actually creating these photographs by layering hundreds of tourist photos that she's taking from the web into photographs from landmarks about coming from global tourist sites. So, and as you can see here on the image that was taken from the installation at Centre Mercure, these photographs, they create dreamlike, airy images where the landmark appears blurred, but still very recognizable, and highlighting how we collectively photograph the same monuments over and over again from similar vantage points. So photo opportunities, as Vincent has said, had been part of our public art exhibition from May to October in Esch. So this is, as I said, the view of Centre Mercure. Another one, maybe there again, you see one, the Golden Gate. There we have Mount Fuji, Venice, Taj Mahal, Tiananmen Square. Corinne, do you like to travel?
I would love to say yes, but today I don't know any longer because when you travel, I love taking the road. But when you travel now, it seems since the late 80s when I used to travel, things have changed a lot. And among those, for example, one of the souvenirs I used to have is food. And food now, you can have like very good Japanese food in Paris or have a proper good Swiss fondue in Singapore. So these little things like food or also surprise that you might have during travel have disappeared a little because of social media, maybe because of trip advisors, a style of website don't make you follow a line and with less surprise. So unless you take the road and just try still to be surprised by things, I would say that I travel less and less.
But you travel very much online.
Yes.
To many different tourist sites. How many have you visited online?
I do travel a lot online. I guess about 120 sites, different sites. One specific group, mainly, as you mentioned, photo opportunities, which is about 45 different sites around the world, mainly touristic sites. And then on Paris, about 35 sites, and maybe 120. Something like that.
And how did this idea start? How did you get the idea of looking at practices by amateur photographers about sites from global tourism online?
This came through a travel in 2005, actually, in Pisa. So when you go to Pisa, you go to see the Leaning Tower, like everyone. And so it happens that when you go to Pisa and to the Leaning Tower, there is one specific site where you have really space to do your picture of the Leaning Tower. You cannot really do another, either you don't have enough space otherwise, or otherwise if you go from the site, you don't have the Leaning Tower doesn't seem to lean. So you have this big park where you can play with the Leaning Tower and make your picture. And with my husband, we started to calculate how many people were there and how many people were doing these pictures. And thinking that they should look the same because we all do the picture from the same spot and it was the same period. So we calculated and we then said, okay, during the hour we were there are like 50 people. How many that makes in one day, in 1 week, in 1 month, in 1 year. And that was already in 2005 a big amount of images done of that site. And that was the start where digital camera was start to be very used. So I checked online what I could find once back home. just using keywords like Leaning Tower or Pisa, and I could scroll images and images of the Leaning Towers. So I checked, oh, maybe that's just a chance. So I checked with Eiffel Tower, and again, I could scroll images and images of the Eiffel Tower. I started to gather them, and that's how my work started, actually.
And it's true that we definitely love taking pictures from all the places we visit, and sometimes even, or very often now, even the fact of taking, or the act of taking the picture is almost more important than visiting the site itself or having the experience of the site. And many visitors, and I'm sure that this is something that you also have been able to observe, for many tourists and visitors, they are experiencing the site through the screen of their camera, and not actually by looking at the monument, or by just being in the here and now of the space. But it is, even if this practice has certainly been amplified by social media and the fact of having smartphones with cameras at all times with us, it is a practice that is anchored in a historical tradition. And I would just like to look back a little bit in what kind of practice this tourist images are, what kind of practice they are part of. And Corinne has, here, well, sorry, this is Mount Fuji. So we have 2 historical images that are also coming from your personal database.
Yeah, even in the 1840 with daguerreotype, we say in English, daguerreotype, yeah. Monuments have been photographed since the beginning of photography. And even, for example, in France, you had a commission where they selected and they commissioned people to photograph monuments. And at that time already, there were like a kind of big discussion of what to photograph. And at that time in France, for example, they choose what to photograph. And that means also what was important as monument. So there is a selection which also happened with the American sceneries, where it has been also commissioned, and which reveal today what we still look at when we go to America and to these famous landscapes. And so the photography of these monuments have been done since long. And then at the end of the 19th century, with the Kodak, which had these films, you could have like boxes. You could have like boxes that you could do 100 slides, and they could like change the film in this box and send you back. So, and that's how started the way we photographed the monuments at that time, or we start to travel with photography.
What's very important in what you've been saying is the fact that, so we have these, there has been a topography of these important, of what has been considered as important in travel photography. What kind of monument was important to preserve for posterity also. So this has formatted our view of all these tourist sides of the world until today. So it hasn't started only with social media, but this is a very old tradition that has then been amplified by the advent of photography being made popular also by Kodak, mass photography by cameras. But already back then, also with the distribution of postcards on a very, very large scale, which was around the year 1910, 15, where people have been formatted by these images that have already back then been massively distributed. And this is what we are continuing to do today, just that we can all be, of course, photographers, and we all travel enormously and take pictures. So that's also here we see a picture of Monument Valley, where we are asked, there are specific points where we have the nice view, where we get the perfect picture.
Yeah, there are USA and all these famous landscapes are a very good example of how we do paths to go to these places and photograph. Sometimes because it's no access, so they create the access to it, or sometimes because they became so famous that they create this point, like here with movies and a photographer like Ansel Adams who did all these images. So we recreate them and we reinforce the aura of this place in some ways. And yeah, even in museum here, you can see with museum where they can, they are even suggested selfies, or in Las Vegas, that's my pictures on the right. And even when we went through Las Vegas, we stopped by this sign, which is famous. And it happens that even there is a kind of agreement between the tourists not to be alone for the selfie or for the photograph. So they are queuing so that not to be too many people at the same spot, and believe in some way that we are alone with the sign.
Exactly. So usually when we take pictures, we don't want to have any other people on our trophy picture, let's say that we take back from our travels. There's also I had a quote from Susan Sontag saying it already in 1977 in her book on photography. So taking photographs fills the same need for the cosmopolitans accumulating photograph trophies of their boat trip up the Nile or the 14 days in China as it does for the lower middle class vacationers taking snapshots of the Eiffel Tower or Niagara Falls, a way of certifying experience. And I think that's something really important. Photographs are a proof that we have been in a place. And so certifying experience, taking photographs is also a way of refusing the same experience by limiting experience to the search of the photogenic, by converting experience into an image, a souvenir. So that's what Susan Sontag remarked in 77. And this is the backdrop, let's say, of your photographic practice. And one important aspect also is we were talking about the fact that we don't like to have any other people on our pictures, but you also look at the masses, the tourists taking pictures. Oh, yes, sorry, that was another image about the experience, been there, done that. And this is, of course, what the pyramid at the Louvre looks like on a daily basis. But of course, we don't like to have all these people in the image. And this is what Corinne sees.
Yeah, in the work app on the top, this is a work I did for a book based on tourism in Paris and how we act and how we react. And compared to what you saw before with the monuments, we are just passing by in some way, and the monuments are really there forever. And that's what I try to translate through this work. And the work down, which is me here now, was at the Sacré-Cœur, and I was looking at people, how they photograph the Sacré-Cœur. And I don't know if you've been there before, but when you arrive down the Sacré-Cœur, you realize that we go there, we do the pictures, and then we leave. And what happens is that there is no longer with the smartphone, there is no longer interaction with what we are facing, but we are just looking at the smartphone, and so as an image already. So we go through image, we don't go through the monuments any longer. So that's what I try to translate here.
Exactly. And we had already been talked briefly about the incredible number of images that are taken every day or every year. Do you have the numbers?
Yeah, it's 1.8 trillion of images. And I know that, Françoise, you calculated how many that makes by second. And it's 57,000 images by second. So that's a huge amount. I'm thinking that today we tend to share them online. So you cannot imagine how many images are online and accessible.
But it is exactly that huge online database of images that is the source material for your work.
Yeah, that's my base actually. So all these images are taken from online for my series. So just to explain the work, how it's made. So I'm looking, for example, here as Taj Mahal or Agra as a keyword. And I'm scrolling then, of course, images of the same kind of image of the monument. And I start to download them. So first I check what comes the most often as a view, as my average view, and then I download them. So here you just see about 100 of these images, but there are thousands and thousands of these images. And I download maybe like 300, 400 of them. And to make them, then I select by making them 100 of them. So, So here's an example of Mrs. Tsai. It's a family that I followed for a while on a blog. So they're traveling around the world. And then all these images, I select a segment where I'm going to gather them on the same spot. And so then on transparency, I layer them on top of each other with this segment. And that's how that makes So all these images gathered together on transparency makes these images. I'm selecting images that are from different time, of course. It's about 100, it can be 100 years of time. And it's different weather, different people there. It's all these images in some way look similar, but they're all like different because of the season, because they are personal to the people. So they are this trick between different and same at the same time.
Exactly. And you also have brought us a video.
Yeah.
Of the puppy, where maybe you can just explain. But maybe Corinne, maybe you can just explain.
Yeah. So for commission for the Beaux-Arts Museum in Bilbao, I worked on the puppy that Kunz made, and it's by the Guggenheim, and we tend to do the picture in front of the puppy or do the puppy as a picture. So I gathered like the other bird you saw. I gathered them all together, about 150 images there. And in transparencies, they are all the same that you saw before. And this time I did a video to explain in some way this kind of transparency, and the 150 images are by 1% that change slowly. So you can see slightly, so it's 1% of transparency by 1% of transparency. These 150 images are changing slowly.
Exactly. And I actually would like to quote also about your work. Alistair Foster, who's a photo historian and a curator, just to situate your work as well, your practice. So Alistair said, while the artworks of Corinne Vionnet have an impressionistic feel, they do not arise from the visual sensibility of an individual's direct response to place. Quite the opposite. Their soft tracery captures the phantom iconographies that haunt the hyperspace of mass mediation. They speak not to the mindfulness of personal immersion in the here and now, but to a slotting of the world into the prepackaged patterns long led down by contemporary tourism. So I always found that this is a very nice summing up of your work and your practice. I had a few slides also to discuss a bit further what image making practices of tourist sites have become, but I think we should leave the floor to Luca and Vincent, and maybe we can get back to questions later on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Françoise. So I'm just going to quickly run through the rest of the presentation to actually go to Luca's. So I'll quickly introduce Luca. So Luca, you're an artist based in Montreal and soon to be based in London. You are a designer, a researcher whose work is concerned with the queer and trans digital culture, community-based archiving, and artificial intelligence. You are the founder of Queering the Map, a community-generated counter-mapping platform for digitally archiving LGBT Q2IA plus experience in relation to physical space, a project for which you received worldwide attention and for which you were awarded the honorary mention at the 2018 Prix Ars Electronica, nominated for the Lumen Prize for Digital Art and the Kanta Information is Beautiful. This project is also included in the Library of Congress LGBTQ+ Studies Web Archive. And you are here today because, as I mentioned earlier, we invited you to present a work as part of our exhibition this summer. And the work was called QT-Bot. It is a work that I'm not going to explain too much because I let you dive in. It's a work that's, that has different iteration and shapes, but for which you also received an honorary mention at the 2023 Prix Ars Electronica in the category of Artificial Intelligence and Life Art. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So I will share two projects that are about my engagement with data as an artist and designer. So the first is Queering the Map, which is a community-generated counter-mapping platform for digitally archiving LGBTQ2IA+ experience in relation to physical space. And so the way that it works is that users anywhere in the world, can tag a location on a map and add an anonymous text-based story describing a queer or trans experience that has transpired at that location. And I started the project in 2017 because I was really interested in how digital technologies, particularly the internet, had transformed queer and trans relationships to space. The idea that the internet killed the gay bar, how queer and trans people were meeting and producing spaces with one another had changed and continues to change so drastically. And so Queering the Map is a project about gathering all of these different ways of thinking about queer and trans experience in relation to space. And over the last 7 years that the project has been online, it has grown rapidly and is, now home to just over 850,000 stories in 28 different languages. And the stories on Queering the Map really run the gamut in terms of emotional valence. So there's anything from tender moments of connection to experiences of heartbreak, experiences of banality, community, state violence, homicide, suicide, everything. All of these huge and varied affects all living inside of this map-based archive. And so over the past, I would say, 4 years since 2020, because my primary role in relation to this, or the role that I undertake on the day-to-day basis is that of a maintenance worker and a moderator for this platform. So all of the submissions that are made to the site are moderated by either myself or a group of volunteer moderators. And the experience of moving through the variety of affects that are housed on this platform that, as I mentioned, move from beautiful moments of connection to state violence in many cases, is a particularly overwhelming experience that is very similar to perhaps a heightened version of any kind of scroll on a social media platform in which we're jumping between images of cats and genocide. And so I became really interested in thinking about an aesthetics of dissociation that occurs when we are navigating through all of these kinds of disparate information types, and began exploring the use of artificial intelligence to capture, let's see if I can make this video play, to try to capture this feeling of dissociation. So this video is called Sitting Here With You in the Future.
Sitting here with you in the future. Faggotry as a matter of course, but I'd heard that this was normal and not considered nearly as crazy as it seems to the rest of the world. Queer email at this coffee shop. We ended up kissing our stairs in his bedroom, and he died. I left this town though. I tried simply, but I heard 6 months later. My friends didn't accept a time I hadn't been worked with me fully in the elevator.
So I'll pause it there, if I can. There we go. And so this video is my first engagement with machine learning tools in relation to the database of querying the map. And the way that I created that video is first by scraping the Google Street View images that are tagged in relation to querying the map. So taking all of the long lat coordinates of the points on querying the map. At the time of that video, there was about 122,000. So I created one database of 122,000 Google Maps Street View images that had been tagged on querying the map, and then another database of all of the text from querying the map. And in that video, it's 2 separate machine learning models, one that is trained on the text that's generating these warped, slightly sensical, slightly nonsensical texts that are created from an amalgamation of all of the stories that were present on the website at this time. And then the imagery is a latent space walk of a machine learning model learning all of these locations haunted by queer and trans affect. And so this image here is from the installation as part of Elektron this year, which was a really exciting moment because it was the opportunity to translate these digital works back into physical space. And so kind of completing this circle with the stories on querying the map being uploaded to a website and then processed through these machine learning models and then reintroduced into public space. And so this image here is the very first text and the very first image that Qtbot version 1 created, which says, "Sitting here with you in the future," which is the title of the first series of Qtbot prints, as well as the title of the video. So here are a couple more. This one says, "I was trans, it was entranced." This one says, "Either I was queer here or it was just down the street. We're too early to say." And this last one says, "Walking through that future, and since then I never looked back, now that I know it made sense." And so when I am working with Qtbot and working with all of the outputs that it generates, I'm particularly interested in the ones that create this slippage between time and space, and sort of the possibility of something making sense and then it not quite, it falling over in its attempts at sense making. And then this summer, I undertook the next stage of the Qtbot project as part of a residency at the Center for Culture and Technology in Toronto in Canada. And that culminated with a solo exhibition, which is called "Sometimes I Forget What Feeling Felt Like Because I Was Never There When It Happened." And the title is also something that was generated by Qtbot and references both the experience of dissociation and describes pretty accurately what this machine learning model that's trained on all of these fleshy human experiences is producing, an experience that it has never had, but is nonetheless speaking. And so this new series in the Qtbot project, let's see. Oh, there we go. Maybe it'll stay on the screen, maybe it will move. So as part of this second phase of the project, I developed a new machine learning model system in which, whereas in the first video and image series, the text and the images are created separately, in this new model, the machine learning model is trained to understand the Google Maps Street View images by the stories that are on querying the map. So rather than understanding them through an image description format as this is a road with a tree and a car, it understands the image as this is where I had my first kiss, or this is where I met this person. And so then when prompted via a text that's written by this machine learning model that's trained on all of the text from querying the map, the images and the video outputs have a contextual relationship to the text prompt. And so we could say that the machine is learning to understand how queer and trans space might look like. Of course, the images and the text look exactly the same as in the first series, but it was an exciting technical challenge to see if this was possible and if it would create any different outputs. And so this exhibition comprised of a new video work, a series of light boxes with prints, and a merch. What's that called? A merch line of sorts. These are stills from the video work, which is also called "Sometimes I Forget What Feeling Felt Like Because I Was Never There When It Happened." And then these are some of the light boxed prints with geographic aluminum frames. And then the last thing that I'll talk about is the merch line, which was a particularly new form of making in relation to Qtbot. And the idea of the merch line came to me firstly because this summer was one of my first opportunities to exhibit in a gallery-based context, and as an artist that works primarily in digital context and hyper-circulatable contexts, gallery spaces are not necessarily the sites of circulation that I find the most interesting, just because my practice is so relational, it's community-based, and so the privatization of it inside of a gallery feels less interesting than other sort of modes. So the idea of moving to merch to try to circulate these stories in ways that were more immediately accessible to my community was the decision to make this merch line. This is my favorite piece of merch, which is a Realtree hat that says ivermectin made me non-binary, which is, I think, the best work I've ever made, because it is the perfect articulation of the horseshoe theory, in which we're taking ivermectin, which, if you're not familiar, was a drug that in 2020 Trump said would cure people of COVID. And so it has this hyper right-wing connotation. And then non-binary, which is the gendered experience which is my gendered experience, is very much left-coded. And so it's these two sort of poles of internet culture meeting to try to explode one another. And part of this, another sort of reason for this merch line is trying to harness. This is a thong, also a text by QTbot that says, "You want to save me, suck it out," which is a particularly exciting idea. So another reason for this merch line is trying to think about the kind of sort of queer and trans approaches to humor on the internet, irony on the internet, as a strategy for engaging with particularly right-wing troll behavior, which, I mean, I think the right generally has a better facility over the internet than the left does. And so trying to lean into this vernacular and circulate it through edgy merch feels like one way of trying to reactivate a kind of critical relationship to the internet. And and this shirt says, "You may remember our first kiss at 14,000 kilometers an hour," which I also love, because that's exactly what a first kiss feels like. And then, because the project is so embedded in a queer sensibility, a lot of the shapes come from queer and trans rave culture. And then the last slide is another of my favorite sentences, because the project is the idea of dissociation very much comes from a lot of contemporary trans writing on ketamine and trans experience, particularly Mackenzie Wark's writing, who writes really brilliantly about trans experience, raving, and ketamine. Hannah Baer, who has a phenomenal book called Trans Girl Suicide Museum, which is also about trans experience and ketamine. And so this tiny little shoulder bag says, "Ketamine and a cigarette lighter. I'm still going strong with this whole gay culture thing," which is a pretty succinct articulation of one of the ways that QTbot is interpreting this massive database of queer and trans experience.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have lots of questions. But thank you, because what I think is really interesting with the two presentations that you did is that, Corinne, you work with images mostly, and then you work with text, which I think are the two most, of course, important, way of communicating on the internet. And I think one other thing that links your work is that you both work. I mean, you started to get information and to get part of your materials from the internet, and especially from Google. So basically, for those who don't know, so Google was launched in 1998. So you started the series just a few years later, in 2005 or 2001 and 5. And Luca, you started creating the map back in 2015, whereas I think Google Street View actually started in 2007. So that was I think it's quite interesting, like to actually remark the fact that you have a technology that is made available to a public, and then a few years later, like less than 5, people actually use it for art. And sometimes it actually starts much earlier. So it's one of the things that I think are interesting to highlight and to stress, the fact that yes, technologies actually can be used by artists at a really early stage. And it's the same thing with AI. And, a model that you train yourself. And I think it's important to stress as well, Luca, that you are not using all of those big models that we all have access to, since 2020, but it's actually a data set that you built yourself to actually train your model. And one of the other things that I want to highlight, and actually I want to ask you a question about it, is that you are labeling your data set yourself. So you don't rely on other people doing it, which is usually what happens when you work with a big model. So basically you have people who are really badly paid, who have a split second to actually label an image or like part of an image. Whereas you have those images that you label yourself with a label that is actually, completely up to you. So you basically attach emotions, I would say, to an image. Whereas, in a general model, basically you have a description, a very clear description. So if you have an image of a chair, the labeling would be a chair on a black, in front of a house or whatever. Whereas for you, you actually bring lived emotions and things that were actually, that come from people and from experience of the real world. So, but how did you come, why did you come up with this idea of introducing emotions in a data set?
Yeah, I guess it's a very anti-formalist approach, which I think is what is dismaying about artificial intelligence generally, and a lot, and not all, but some art that is also being made around and with artificial intelligence is this hyper literalism and hyper formal descriptions of the world that then get coalesced into very linear and simple ways of seeing or understanding the world. And then we have very similar aesthetics, very similar forms of writing. I think we're generally quite familiar with the kind of affectless form of writing that ChatGPT spits out. Similarly, a lot of hyper-accessible image generation models, things begin to look all the same. And so the idea of essentially tricking the machine or using the machine against itself, or using the data of querying the map in a not particularly productive way in terms of how it is describing a location, because in many cases the stories on querying the map don't have any sort of formal descriptive qualities of a location, but are really about what has unfolded there. Yeah, and I guess more to your question in terms of the reasoning for doing that was really about trying to articulate the sense of information overload that is the experience of moderating the platform of querying the map, and all of the labor that goes into that, because it's a project that's received a pretty significant amount of media attention, but very infrequently is the labor of moderation spoken about, which is fine. The way that it's approached is very much what it does on the front end, but I am much more interested in what's happening on the back end and the kind of infrastructures and updating of infrastructures and human infrastructures that are required to make a platform like this operate. And so QTBot is a way of trying to make that more evident, and then also experiential through making these works in different formats.
Absolutely. Before we start, yes, Rosa, do you have a question, or should we open to the audience?
No, yes, I was
Okay.
just going to say if anyone has a question in the audience, because it's two very different practices, working with digital data, digital images, also from almost two very different periods already. So Corinne being very early into digital imagery, and Luca a bit later. Maybe you have a question to our artists. If not, I might have another one. Even though your work is so very different, listening to both your presentations about what you're doing, I find that both your works are very much about resistance in one way or another. Corinne, for you, I see the resistance to general mass photography trends, and also a resistance to experiencing the world the way we do. Also to slow down, to try to get to the heart of a place. Do you have any comments?
I would like to add, and that's also reply to your question to both of you, is that when I do make these images, so I do construct these hundreds of images on top of each other. So in some way, it's also a very personal feeling that I have. And when I do build these images, I always say that this is also my own souvenir or my own imaginary of these places. So that's why reply to the emotion you are talking about. And that's what I try to translate. And it's not AI that is doing it, because then for me, it will be a cold result in some way of this amount of images. And to do it myself, maybe I try also to translate these emotions.
And I also find that you are both creating spaces and places that you can relate to. Luca, would you like to say something about that?
Yeah. I maybe will answer that question by remarking on one of the things that I love the most about your work and seeing it for the first time as part of Elektron was this feeling that I think we're both engaging with, maybe perhaps of trying to tend to or lean towards the kind of collectivities that are available on the internet. I think it seems like we're both less interested in an individual artistic expression, but rather what it means to bear witness to multiple people's experience of something and try to circle around it rather than make a definitive claim.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's why the also to gather all these information together and trying to I don't have the word to take the source of that and to try to translate that.
Yeah.
That's the nice things of it, actually.
Yeah.
It was also something that was very important for us. I mean, since our subject this year was making visible the infrastructures around the digital world that we often, things that we don't see. And communities is also often an element that we don't see. And they are so much present in both of your works. And that is also one of the reasons that we selected your work. And it was such a pleasure also to work with you on this, on materializing, on giving a vision, also what a world that we build collectively could look like.
Exactly. And actually, to go back to resistance, it's also a way for us to remember that even though our experience of the internet is more and more tailor-made, so basically everything you see online is actually designed and selected, curated for you, but actually the base of it and actually the kind of like, the foundation of it is a collective experience, sharing information and sharing a knowledge, which was, like the very start of the internet in the 80s, like sharing a knowledge that is available originally for free, which is not the case anymore. And I think it's important to kind of like remember that. And I think your work kind of like leads us to rethink, of course, of this thing that we've lost a little bit in the last, let's say, 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, algorithm is taking us.
Sorry?
Algorithm is
Yes.
is like forcing us to see or understand the world in the same way, and we have to fight against that.
Yeah, definitely.
If not, maybe to finish. Lucas and Corinne's work is not exhibited at the art fair here, but maybe you can tell the audience where they can see you, where next shows will be. I know you have something coming up, Corinne.
Very soon in Brittany, in France, at Musée de Pont-Aven, solo show there in February, March, and April.
And of course, there's the beautiful new book called Paris, 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 with multiple visions and views about Paris. And Lucas?
I'm in a show that just opened yesterday in Wrocław in Poland at Krupa Art Foundation that will be running until the end of June, if you happen to be there. And I'm showing, sitting here with you in the future, the first video, and then the new video, Sometimes I Forget What Feeling Felt Like, because I was never there when it happened, in a huge immersive space. And you can check out Queering the Map at www.queeringthemap.com. And you can check out my other work at my website, which is lucaslarochelle.com.
Well, then I would like to thank you all for being here this morning at quite an early hour on a Saturday. If you're interested in the work of Elektron, if you're interested in what we are doing, so we are in Esch. We will be, we're currently planning our program for 2025. Come and check us out. We also have a website. It's elektron.lu. Next year's subject will be in sync with Luga, which is the huge garden show taking place in Luxembourg City, in the parks and gardens. We still will be in Esch, but we're going to work on the subject of nature and technology. So thank you. Thank you for coming, and have a great
Thank you.
The Luxembourg Art Week team thanks the speakers and partners for their commitment to the Art Talk program of the 10th edition. The next edition of the fair will take place from November 21st to 23rd, 2025. Join us for a new series of captivating conferences and conversations about art, live at the Glacis and available for replay after the fair.